Hi there, I'm Renee Jones from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, and with me today is Dr. Megan Clark, who has just been appointed the head of the new Australian Space Agency. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Renee.
Well, firstly, congratulations on your appointment. That's pretty big news.
Yes, it still feels like a startup at the moment. We feel a bit like we're in the garage getting this space agency up and running, but it's really exciting.
Well, I guess it means that you'll be able to relate more easily to a lot of Australian space industry at the moment.
Absolutely, and we will be up and running July 1st, so a lot to do between now and then.
You've previously commented that the nation's capital was the logical conclusion for the agency to be based in. Do you still think that's the case, and how will you be assessing potential other locations?
The issue of location and how we engage with the states and territories is absolutely vital for the agency, and all options are open. And if you go back to the purpose of the agency, so why is the agency there? The agency there is there to transform and grow Australia's space industry and how we use space. So how we use space across the broader economy, which has significant value when you think of space in agriculture and what we do in fisheries, in the marine area, everything we do on land. So how we use space, and if we do our job well, we want to inspire Australians with what Australia can do in space, and critical to that will be our international and national partnerships. So now if you step down and say, well, how do we do that? Engaging with industry is something we need to make sure we're doing on the ground in the states and territories. That's going to be a sort of vital place of that action. And of course, we need to make sure we're looking after national policy and national strategy and our regulation piece, etc. So there's elements to consider. In terms of how we'll do that, we were going out, as soon as the agency is up and running, we're going out to talk to the states and territories for them to put their best foot forward, and we'll look at all options.
Great. And you've been given a year in the role, which seems like quite a short time to just casually start a brand new agency. What are your priorities for this first year?
It's certainly not casual, I can assure you. The two really important focus areas for us are how do we have an open door, how do we have that single voice and one door for the international community to engage with Australia's space industry and the space agency. That's such an important role for us. Secondly, how we engage with our industry. How do we meet our purpose? How do we grow where our current industry is, so just under $4 billion, and of course a much broader reach into every aspect of our economy for all Australians. How do we really grow that and engage that, and we'll do that collaboratively. So those international partnerships, the international engagement and the engagement nationally are really going to be key focus areas for us.
The federal government allocated $41 million to establish the agency and has said that this is enough seed funding to kickstart the sector. Do you think this is enough funding to start an agency from scratch and also meet the ambitious targets set out in the expert review?
Yeah, if we step back and look at what was announced in the budget, so there was, let me sort of step even further back, we had the independent review, the expert review group, which I chaired, and we had fantastic people on that review group making recommendations to the government, and the government accepted all of our key recommendations, which was fantastic. And in there we had strategic areas of priority for the country. And the budget response and the government response was accepting those recommendations, and a resounding $300 million in this budget for two of the key strategic areas. So for Geoscience Australia to set up world-class and even world-leading infrastructure for position, navigation and timing for our GPS network, for 10 metre accuracy across the terrestrial area, across all our maritime jurisdictions and all of our airspace, and world-leading going to 3 centimetres in our cities off the mobile network. So that was one of the key areas, and that's funded. And the second was how do we use this tremendous platform that we have in Digital Earth Australia, which is Geoscience's platform, to allow that to be commercialised internationally and by players. So they were two key parts, and they said the third part was to get the agency up and running and to give it some seed funding. So it even sounds like a startup when you say give it some seed funding, which was to get it up and running with ongoing core funding. And then an additional included in that 15 million to start these international discussions and start opening that door so that industry can go through.
So it sounds like it's going to be quite different to what the broader public might normally consider to be a space agency. I'm sure a lot of people are, thinking of NASA, and when Australia might well need a very different approach to an agency and have very different needs. In particular, I was interested in how the agency would play a role in supporting and developing Australia's space industry.
Yeah, it's a good question, because not since we've walked on the moon have we seen such a transformation in the whole space sector. And that transformation is moving from where it was decades ago, controlled mostly by governments, invested by governments, moving into now this commercial realm and opening up that whole industry and commercial area. So, you're right, it isn't going to look like it looked in the past, because Australia's now entering, somewhat late to this party, but we are entering at a time when this transformation is really underway. So we can craft the agency to really enter at this point and make sure we're focusing on really that new part of space. New entrants, startups being able to come into this industry that they've never been able to come in before because you couldn't afford to. So it's the industry's transforming, and we're coming in at that time where we can transform it. And so it's seed funding, but actually we're going to do it very differently to the way it's been done in the past.
And I'm sure a lot of people will look at the US space program and ask the question, when are we going to send some Australians up to space? Are there any plans to send some Aussies up there?
Well, it's a great question, and one, of course, that we think about. We're certainly going to put some Aussie equipment and Aussie creativity and Aussie entrepreneurship up there, there's no question. And if you look at even at that transformation, we're starting to see an era of space tourism. So even the way we thought about how someone might go into space, that's transforming. Because our previous thinking was the only way you could go was, as a government-sponsored astronaut, etc. And now we're going to see these new avenues opening as well. And Australia's got a role to play in space tourism as well. So this is a much broader vision and bigger opportunities. But our focus, there's no question, our focus is really around building that industry and underpinning our economy and aspiring Australians with what we can do.
Fantastic. And your review found in the 2015 to 16 financial year that the private sector made up 88% of Australia's space economy. Is Defence investing enough in our space sector? Defence
is going to be a major investor, so some $10 billion over the next 20 years. So you think of that as a fundamental framework for what's going to happen. That's a really significant investment. So defence is critical, and as a small country, it's not like we can separate out the defence investment and the civil investment. Companies that will be working with defence will also want to grow their exports in the civil area, and so we see that as really important, if you like, ballast, to use a term of Christopher Pine.
And it's a very exciting time for the Australian space industry, but perhaps even more exciting, at least to me personally, is that it's been great to see such an esteemed woman of science be appointed in the top job. Do you have any advice for young and emerging women studying and working in STEM?
Well, look, everybody, certainly from my point of view, it's the people that you have around you, and I'm certainly keen that the agency is an opportunity for people to develop their careers, for Australians to really play their part in space. So it's not about me, it will really be about how we bring forward that next generation and generations that come beyond that can see Australia take its place in space. And there's a much broader role there. It's not just, as I said, the industry piece, but Australia can be a responsible citizen in space. and that's a broad role internationally with the United Nations, the peaceful use of space, being safe and secure, and being one of the players. So I see for young people, for young girls, young boys, hopefully we can create those opportunities. And my only advice is, look, just start to engage with your families, with the schools, with the communities. They themselves can be little agents of change and agents of bringing some of these fantastic developments into the communities and their spheres of influence as they learn about what's going on in space. So we really want to encourage that next generation.
So my most important question today, if you had to choose between one, Star Wars or Star Trek?
Oh, it's got to be Star Trek.
Incorrect answer. Really?
It's Star Trek for me.
All right.
Star Wars for you.
Stars for everyone.
Stars for everyone.
And this interview will be shown at our space conference, Building Australia's Strategy for Space, which is happening next month. Do you have any message to the delegates attending?
Well, I'm sorry that I can't be there, but this is really about coming together. This is working together. I'd love to see some new collaborations, building on old collaborations, partnerships, just some magic come out of the ASPI conference, and I just wish everybody the very best for the conference.
Thank you so much for your time today, Megan.
My pleasure.
And thank you for watching. If you'd like to read more about Australia's strategy in space, check out our space series on our blog, The Strategist, and you can always follow us on our Twitter account at ASPI_org.